today we got 3 questions as per every session. Let's get started with the first question. So it is, I've been considering expanding my professional visibility through speaking engagements. What strategies would you recommend for securing these opportunities? And this question comes from Carlos, who is a senior associate at looks like a global law firm, but 60 lawyers in Australia. And Carlos specialises in maritime law. Thanks for the question, Carlos. So first, I think speaking engagements are a great strategy for growing your visibility beyond your existing network. You get to piggyback off other people's audiences, which is a really good thing to do when you're trying to build your own. So in your instance, you're in the maritime industry. What I'd recommend doing is reaching out to some industry bodies that represent the maritime industry. And a really easy way to find these is with ChatGPT. So you can jump onto ChatGPT and you can type in quite a simple prompt like, find me 20 business-related industry associations in the maritime industry. And then you might follow it up with, well, prepare a simple list with the association's name, perhaps a 1-sentence description that's going to help you sort of work out if it's a good one for you or not, and their web address. So rather than having to Google it now and try to find them, you can easily do that sort of thing in AI, where you can just type in a simple prompt and it'll give you a list of URLs and associations, just like that. So from there, you're probably going to want to shortlist it to, say, the most relevant 5 or 10 or something like that. Then spend a little time researching those associations. Have a look at the type of events that they already run. They're likely to have chapter events and annual conferences and that type of thing. When you're sort of prioritizing who you're going to reach out to for the speaking engagements, you might also try, sorry, I'm just going to have to stop because I feel like I've lost my camera. Have I lost my camera, Alex? No? Okay. Sorry. So when you're prioritizing the associations, have a look at like associations that don't already have like a lot of law firm sponsors, because they're going to be a lot easier to start with. If you have time on your side, begin by attending a couple of chapter events and sort of get a feel for the association to begin with. That's really about making, you more comfortable rather than like a prerequisite for reaching out, but it might make you feel like, okay, you have a bit of a feel of what the association's about. If you don't have time, just cold outreach to them. So we'll talk about that in a moment. Before you go to cold outreach, you just want to find the right person to contact. So you're going to use LinkedIn for that. And I'd say for smaller associations, you'd be able to contact the president or the secretary directly. Given you're working in the industry, like the maritime industry already, you might be able to find an in with someone else and maybe they can make them an introduction. But for the purposes of this exercise, let's assume that you're going to have to just email them directly. So what you want to do in that email is make it easy for them to say yes. And what I mean by that is you want to help them reduce their workload, which is they are always looking for people to have speaking to their members. And how are you going to make them look good to their members? So what value can you bring that's going to provide value to their members? And I would say that most associations, not all, but most, are really looking for content all the time to provide value to their members. So let's have a look now at the email. In no more than sort of 5 or 6 sentences, this shouldn't be a long email, shouldn't be War and Peace. You want to cover the topic that you think will be relevant to their members. So what's the topic? Or you might suggest maybe 2 or 3 if you've got enough material, but start with a topic that you think will be relevant to their members. Explain how that topic's going to benefit their audience, or at least a subset of their audience. Something that associations will want to look for when bringing in speakers is the kind of why now. Why is that important now? So if you in your email, can you like kind of identify if you have a topic idea, why is that important to address now? If you have a link to something you've already published on the topic, you might want to include that in the email as well. That just gives them a bit more background as to what that topic's going to be about. If it makes sense to do so, give them a proposed format. So whether it's like a 30-minute webinar or a 15-minute slot at a conference, maybe it's speaking at the next chapter event, whatever it is, if you can propose a format for them, that's going to really help. And then simply just ask them for a quick discussion about whether that would be useful for their members. So that's the email that you're going to send out to the association organisers. Unlike sort of doing like a sales outreach, which really feels uncomfortable and stuff, this usually gets like a really good return rate. I would be expecting sort of 1 in every 3 or 4, you would get some sort of response from someone, and it's usually positive. I also thought I might just share a couple of advanced tips. Conference organisers, associations love hiring people that have a book. I know I'm just dropping in like a book like it's this really easy thing to do, but they do love a book. You might also have a speaking reel. So it'd be like a 1 or 2 minute video of you speaking at different conferences. Not essential for this process, but if you're doing a lot of speaking, that can sort of help get some of those like larger gigs, we might call them. And I thought I'd also share a few quick ideas for getting inbound inquiries. So rather than having to reach out to people to get speaking engagements, just some things where people might be able to find you online. So I thought the first thing that would help would be just create a new speaker page on your website. So it's just a page on your website that sort of might come off your profile. You're at a pretty large law firm, so that might be tricky. So you might just create a separate site altogether, just like a one-page site just for your speaking engagements. You'd want to optimize that page title for SEO. So in the page title, you might have something like maritime industry lawyer and conference speaker. So kind of something that kind of shows, the industry, and you also do speaking. You have links to your logo and your headshots. Include some information about your most common topics, like a paragraph or so on each of the topics that you cover. And that would be it. So to wrap that up, the best approach to get started on getting more speaking engagements, I think, at least to begin with, is outreach. As I said, it's nothing like doing cold outreach to selling something. In this instance, you're not asking necessarily for something, you're offering value. And I think you'll see some really good results from doing this. 2. Maria is a principal at a commercial firm in Brisbane, and she's asked, LinkedIn has become increasingly important in our profession. In your experience, what's the optimal frequency for sharing content on my LinkedIn page that maintains visibility without overwhelming my network? Okay. This is a tricky one. So I believe that most advice for lawyers on this topic is misguided. And I'd also say that my answer is likely to attract lots of people disagreeing with me. And they'll have really valid counter arguments to my answer. But my answer is based on working with really successful lawyers who are extremely busy. And it kind of comes at it from the perspective that most lawyers don't want to be career influencers. So it's not their end goal is to be an influencer. I'd also say that most lawyers operate differently to other professionals. So I don't think you can compare like for like with other professionals, because with lawyers, even when they're partners, they're still very busy working with clients. At least that's the common model. So my answer is going to come from that perspective. So let's go back to the question. How often should you post without overwhelming your network? So let's think about, firstly, what's the goal? There's visibility, there's reputation building, and I think they're not mutually exclusive. So it's how do we increase? We want to increase visibility, want to improve our reputation. I think they kind of go hand in hand. If the goal's inquiries, I genuinely believe you're on the wrong platform. Unless you have like some sort of really low commitment kind of offer. So say it's a review of something, or could be an event or something like that. You're generally not going to get inquiries from LinkedIn. And I think you'll be a bit disappointed if you think that's going to happen like on a regular basis. And another one that I commonly get is I want to build relationships. And I would say that that's also unlikely to happen on LinkedIn. So most relationships will come like, they might start on the platform, but they're going to have to come off the platform to actually build into a relationship. So it might open a door or start a conversation, which is great, but you're not going to build the relationship on the platform. And I thought I'd share a story, just a really quick story on like that in actual play. So one of our vendors is absolutely prolific on LinkedIn. They would post multiple times a day, have a very strong opinion on everything, and so really, really active. Anyway, I noticed that two other connections of mine always liked and commented on this vendor's post. So when I met these people, I actually asked them and said, "Oh, so you know that person, that vendor? They do some work with us." And the response I got from both of them was the same. "Oh, I think I know that person. What do they do?" Now, keep in mind that these people have been engaging with this person's content all the time. And I think that's really common. There's kind of like these LinkedIn networks, but people don't really know who they are. And so I don't think relationships really get built on LinkedIn. I mean, it's one story, it's my example, but it's something I'm sort of seeing over and over again is they're not real relationships on LinkedIn. But let's go back to the two main goals, visibility and reputation building. If we look at how frequently you should post from just visibility, if you just think about visibility in isolation, well, then obviously the more frequent, the better. I mean, if the goal is pure just visibility, and if we put aside how the algorithm works just for a moment, which we'll come back to in a sec, you would say that the more frequent, the better. But if we pair that goal with, well, building your reputation, which I think is really the core of what a lawyer is trying to do when they post on LinkedIn. I would say the more frequently you post, you have this potential that it has a negative impact. So if I look at our clients and the thousands of lawyers that we've worked with over the years, I'd say that the successful ones all have one thing in common, and that's that they're really busy with client work. They still find a small amount of time for marketing and BD, but they do treat marketing and BD as a means to an end. I'd say very few are like overly active on social platforms. I wouldn't say they're not active at all, but it's not like they're posting sort of every day or anything like that. And I think on reflection, that seems right. I don't think people want an expert that like publicly, it looks like they don't do any legal work because they're always posting on LinkedIn. I think that kind of gives off a very different vibe, and I wouldn't say necessarily a good one. I do think the intention's right, being visible, sharing helpful advice and that type of thing, but I think it can turn negative if it's too frequent. So my rule of thumb is for anything that's like thought leadership driven or insight driven, I would say every week might be a stretch target. I think every 2 weeks is probably about the sweet spot. But even if you did something like 10 to 15 high quality posts a year, I think that'd be a good result. I'd only post when you have something useful to share. So I know this answer is not maybe what the LinkedIn pros and LinkedIn advisors might say, but I think my answer takes into consideration, you've got a lawyer's goals, which is visibility and reputation building. It also takes into consideration how people choose lawyers. So looking at their buyer behavior. prospects that have been referred in. They might look at LinkedIn. If the last time that person's posted 3 years ago, okay, that might be a bit concerning, but if someone hasn't posted in, say, a couple of months or something like that, I don't think that's going to deter anyone. I also think about the capacity to do it properly. So even with a support team, the support team is going to be able to help with proofreading, cutting up video, putting images together, that type of thing. But the insights are still going to need to come from the lawyers. And I've also considered like how the algorithm works, and that's, well, it rewards engagement. So if you're posting every 20 minutes, it's unlikely that you're going to get likes and comments and shares on every single post. And that's actually going to start throttling your visibility when you get low engagement on those posts. So you need to have that kind of right balance. I think if lawyers were in like a different industry, so say it was a consulting or training or something, I think it's a different proposition. And I think that lends itself to higher frequency. So I know lots of people might disagree with me on this one, and I think they're perfectly valid criticisms. This is my experience. This is what I've seen work really well for lawyers. I would wrap that up and just say I think it's between every sort of 2 to 5 weeks is what I've seen really work well for really busy and successful lawyers. Okay, final question. So Ash is an operations manager in a Melbourne litigation practice, and they've asked, is a monthly law firm newsletter worthwhile, or should we direct our efforts elsewhere? Okay. Generally speaking, my advice is a hard no for email newsletters and a hard yes for email campaigns. So let me explain. Email marketing is by far the most effective way to proactively reach your audience with some sort of update. So if you have something that you need to tell people, email marketing is by far the most effective way to do it. It absolutely towers over, say, social media platforms or advertising. So my answer said absolutely yes for email campaigns and kind of a hard no for email newsletters. So it might sound like semantics, but I thought maybe let's talk about, what the difference is between the two things. So when I think of an email newsletter, I think of something that's sent on a regular basis, like it's sent every month, which is what you're talking about. It might like reference, say, multiple articles. So say it has, say, links to 3 articles. It would typically be quite a long email as a result. So if it's got 3 articles, it's going to be quite lengthy. It'd often be referred to as something like in the subject line. So March 2025 issue or April 2025 issue or something like that. And email newsletters are usually sent to everyone. So just everyone that's ever subscribed to the firm or had any interaction with the firm gets sent the newsletter. An email campaign, on the other hand, is sent on an as-needed basis. So it's sent as news arises or as something's published. And it's usually a single message. So it's one message, one email. It's kind of a rule that we would normally have. If you have one message, send it in one email. And it's sent to a specific group of people. I prefer email campaigns. And the issue I see with email newsletters is, firstly, internally, they're really hard to coordinate. You're trying to get articles coming in from different people on a deadline when lawyers have court and clients breathing down their neck. That can be a really hard thing to do. The other part of that is sometimes partners will get annoyed that their clients are being communicated to. That's a whole other thing. But I would also say that unless your firm has a really niche focus, there's rarely going to be a single person that receives, say, an email newsletter that will find all of the content useful. it's pretty unlikely that it's going to be 3 articles. They're usually going to be different topics, and they're probably going to have 3 different audiences. If they are all relevant, so say we take those 3 articles that you're producing every month, why wouldn't you send them as separate campaigns as they arise? Like, you're going to get 3 times the impact. You're going to be able to have a really on-point subject line, so it's going to be about that content, and you're going to send a brief email. And who doesn't love a brief email? So if we keep in mind the goal of sending out this information, so if we turn that into, if we think about that from the perspective of email campaigns, the goal for lawyers when it comes to email marketing isn't to increase open rates or click-through rates or anything like any other sort of digital marketing metric like that. I think it's like way simpler than that. And it's as simple as it's just to get a reply. So if you send an email and it's about one thing, it's more likely to get a reply. And it's those replies that leads to conversations. And those conversations are what leads to work. And I think campaigns do this, and newsletters are just too broad to kind of get those responses. So my preference is definitely to focus on email campaigns. But like everything, there's a but. There's always, exceptions to the rule. I have seen email newsletters work really well at a few firms. An example I have is where a firm has a really reasonably tight niche, so one audience. They include like 1 to 2 pieces of content that aren't time sensitive, but really relevant to their audience. Where I think this works really well is they include a personal note from the managing partner. And it'll be quite short, but it'll just include some of the initiatives that the firm have coming up, like they're attending a conference and they hope to see you there, or they've got an event that they're hosting and you'd like to invite them, that type of thing. It might just have some, like a paragraph or 2 that kind of introduces that. They might even mention, say, some, if they've got like a firm announcement, like they've brought on a new partner that brings a new skill. So rather than sending that out as a single campaign announcing a new partner, they might whip that into their newsletter. That could work. Where I've seen these work well, these are usually sent out like once every 2 or 3 months. Definitely not every month. I don't think most firms would have enough news for something like that. But in that instance, the newsletter's received really well, and it's done really well. But just grouping like 3 articles, doing it every month, sending it to everyone, I think you'll be disappointed with the results. I think if you just tweak them to email campaigns, sending them to specific parts of your list, you're going to notice a much better outcome.